What's up? I'm B, and whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to the podcast, I hope you are having an amazing day. Today, we are here to react to episode 2 of Carl Lentz's new podcast called Lights On with Carl Lentz. This episode is called Carl and Laura Lentz on HILLSONG, Rehab, and Their Family. And the description says, "It's time to turn the lights on. Welcome to episode 2 with 3 exclamation points. The last 4 years have been a whirlwind of heartbreak, devastation, healing, and restoration. I, Carl Lentz, am beyond excited to have a space where we can all turn on the lights and address our darkness." Join me for episode 2. Let me know how it speaks to you. We will be addressing all things rehab, hidden secrets, healing, experience with HILLSONG, and more. Now, if you're unfamiliar with HILLSONG or any of the associated controversies that have come to light over the past few years, I would definitely recommend going back and watching my reaction to episode 1 of Carl's new podcast, just because I feel like I give a pretty good high-level overview of what's been going on, things that we have learned about, accusations that have been made, not only against HILLSONG as an institution, but the founding family of HILLSONG, the Houstons, which include Frank Houston, his son Brian Houston, and then also Brian's wife Bobby, and then accusations against Carl Lentz, as well as things that Carl Lentz has admitted to. So we touched on all of those things in episode 1, and if you just dive into episode 2 without any context, you might be a little bit lost. So again, if you're just joining us for this topic, go back and watch episode 1. Now, if you are here and ready to dive into episode 2, I do have to say I am very interested to hear what Carl has to say about HILLSONG and how much detail he's going to go into. I feel like this is something that a lot of people are probably going to be interested in, and I'm glad that we are moving on a little bit from the topic that was the focus of episode 1, because I feel like it's just very frustrating to react to something that somebody is saying when you are not on the same page in terms of what they are speaking about. And by that, I mean, Carl kept saying in episode 1, you know, the things that happened were so hard, and we went to counseling because of the things that I did and what had happened. And like he doesn't say really like what he's specifically talking about. He does say that he had an affair. We do know this. We understand that Carl had an affair with a Brooklyn-based jewelry designer that was consensual. And he admitted that to his wife, and so that he has taken ownership of. The designer has not accused him of any impropriety or coercion. It was just like hey, we're both engaging in this consensually, but he was married, and he was the face of the New York branch of HILLSONG, and so obviously that's a pretty big scandal. But then we also have Leona's story, and Leona is the former nanny for the Lentz family. She accused the family of bullying, and she also accused Carl of essentially sexual harassment and assault by saying that he touched her inappropriately without her consent. So we've got, like, yes, there was a consensual affair where the issue was not like sexual coercion. The issue was that you were married and cheating on your spouse. But then there are also the accusations of this was not consensual and he was harassing me sexually. And Carl doesn't like specifically label those things in episode 1. And so it's like, okay, what are we really talking about here? Because if you're not labeling it, I have a hard time actually being able to respond to your attitude about certain things, if that makes sense, you know? It's like, if we're talking about a consensual affair, my response is going to be very different than talking about you sexually harassing an employee. So it was just very frustrating, because it's like, well, if we're talking about this, then this is my opinion. But if we're talking about that, then here's my opinion instead. And so that was just something that was very frustrating to have to kind of toe the line on. And so I am very interested to hear what he has to say about HILLSONG. And I will say, I did go back and I watched the FX documentary, The Secrets of HILLSONG. Let me tell you, I watched that whole thing today, this morning. Like I watched all of those episodes today, and it just like made me angry all over again, for plenty of reasons, and maybe we'll get into some of those like while Carl and Laura are talking. But something that I find very interesting is that, like I said, they wouldn't label very many things in episode 1. They were not using specific language about what happened or what Carl did. But in public statements, they have denied any and all claims from Leona, from the nanny. They said, like, that is not true. Her claims are baseless. We are categorically denying these things. They are false. But then in the docuseries, Laura, Carl's wife, talks about how she just like had a feeling maybe things were going on. Things seemed kind of odd. Leona was always at their house. And then one day she caught Carl and Leona in a compromising position and she punched Leona. She punched this girl, and she said she thinks she broke her pinky when she was punching Leona because she found her in a compromising position with Carl. So what is it? What's the story here? Is it that, like, well, no, it wasn't sexual harassment. It wasn't sexual harassment and assault. It was consensual because Leona was in on it too. Is that your stance? Like, is that what you're saying when you're saying, like, the things that she's saying are false? Is that, well, no, it's a lie because she's saying it was not consensual when it was consensual? Or is it that none of those things ever happened and you were, I don't know, overreacting to what you thought was finding them in a compromising position? I don't know, but I said it in episode 1 and I'm going to say it again in this episode. My natural bend is to believe victims. And so that's where I'm at. Like I believe Leona. And I very much believe that when someone makes an accusation, the person that they're accusing has every right to respond. It's only fair to take their information in and to see like what they have to say for themselves and to, again, like allow themselves to defend themselves. It's kind of like the US court system. You are innocent until proven guilty. So I'm open to hearing what you have to say. But we don't have that from Carl and Laura. We've just got a bunch of vague statements and an admission of physical violence on Laura Lentz's end. So I don't really know what we're supposed to do with that. But let's go ahead and move on to win for the week, and then we will get right into the reaction. If you are new around here, a win for the week is just where you share something positive that happened to you over the past week that you would consider a win, big or small, whatever it may be. If it made you laugh, if it made you feel grateful, if it brought you joy, if you would consider it a win, I want to hear about it and celebrate with you. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can leave it in the comments section down below. And if you are listening to the podcast on Spotify, you can leave it in the Q&A for this particular episode. My win for the week was having Thursday off for the 4th of July. I did not go to a barbecue. I did not go to a party. I did not light off fireworks, but I did spend the day cleaning, organizing, and buying groceries for the week. And so since that's something that I typically do on weekends, I was able to knock that out on Thursday, and it just felt so great to have it done, checked off the list, and then Saturday and today, I get to do what I want. So that is my win for the week, and I cannot wait to hear yours and celebrate with you. Now let's get into episode 2 of the Lights On podcast. Whenever I say the Lights On podcast, I feel my mouth wanting to say the Lights Out podcast, which I don't even listen to that podcast, but I know that it's Josh from Mile Higher, Kendall's husband. Yeah, that's his podcast, and it's been around for a really long time. So I always want to say Lights Out, but this is Lights On with Carl Lentz. I'm going to cut this out so you don't have to hear it, but this episode is starting with an advertisement for Carl's app called the B-Side app, and in the description box for this episode, there's a link to start your 7-day free trial on the B-Side app. There's a link to download on Apple, a link to download on Android, and then there is a PayPal link to donate directly to financially support the B-side. And so they did do ads for this in episode 1, which I cut out, but I didn't say anything about it. And so in this episode, they're starting with another ad for it, and there's probably going to be one throughout the middle. But again, I'm just going to cut it out for y'all so you don't have to hear it. But just want to let you know that that's something that I'm removing from the episode. Oh, and what is the B-side app, you might ask? Great question. I'm not entirely sure. Carl does say that it's a place for exclusive ad-free content, and so I'm not sure if they're uploading additional content there or if it's just that they're uploading the podcast episodes and then not including the ads for B-side on those episodes. But that's what he describes it as, and he also says it's a place for like community and connection, so maybe there are message boards on there. I'm not entirely sure, but that's what I've gathered from his description of it.
Glad you're here.
Hi.
This is episode 2. And what we did on this episode, what you can expect is to hear our story. And we felt like it was important to be able to walk people through our journey up to here. How did we get here? How did we get to a place where we're alive, and we're happy, and we're talking, and we're healing? And it's a story of God's grace. So we hope that it's a blessing to you. In here, we talk about why we left New York City, where we went, what kind of job I got, why I ended up in rehab, what I learned there, and what our hopes for the future are. So that's the hope, is that this episode will continue to shine a light on what can happen if you don't give up. That's our story. You're going to get hit with stuff in life where you can either lay down or you can get up and break through. And our lives are evidence of what happens if you choose the breakthrough route. So hope it's a blessing. Enjoy. See you soon.
Let's go.
We got to LA trying to recover somewhat, and there was a lot of media presence at that time still, and it was a confusing time. And we had a conversation where you basically said, I'm going to get help. And you went to On-Site, which we've referenced before. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that was like for you?
Yeah.
That's where the Skittles happened, and me being the broken vase.
You are the broken vase. Vase.
Tell me a little bit about it.
So On-Site is a place, it's incredible. It's been around for a really long time. And we had some close friends that firstly put you went there first and did an intensive.
Yeah.
When everything first went down, when we were still in New York. And then I went when we got to LA. I was like, okay, now everyone's settled.
Yeah.
I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And so I was able to go to On-Site, which is an incredible place for therapy. And they do group settings. They do family therapy. They have a rehab as well for addiction. They have all these different programs that they did. But I chose to do the intensive, which is a 4-day one-on-one intensive with one person.
Now, I will say, babe, that it was also really hard for you to accept that. And then you did. Because your pattern is to put yourself last.
Yeah.
Even in this. And I don't know who grabbed you. It wasn't me and spoke into you, but you just woke up one day and you were like, I'm going to get help for myself, because your pattern for a long time had been.
I think it was actually Dino Rizzo.
Could have been Dino.
He was like, you need to go. But I felt like I couldn't go until we had a little bit of
somewhat
normalcy
normal
in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't want to do it. And again, I didn't want to leave the kids. I didn't want to leave you. Like, it was really hard because this was the first time I had to really trust you to be for me to be by myself, because I didn't have a phone. I didn't have anything. I was like completely like off the grid, and you were at home with the kids. And it was just a scary time. Like,
you said to me, I'm going.
Yeah.
So you're going to do what you're going to do.
Right.
I got to go.
I mean, I had to go.
Imagine like your entire life is falling apart. Your husband has been fired. You've been forced to resign because she was also like a lead pastor at HILLSONG. And you've lost your jobs. Your husband's in the news for having an affair and being unfaithful. Your daughter was in a mental health facility, and they shared a little bit about that and how their daughter was just not not in a good spot, and they had to call her while she was in treatment and tell her that the news was going to be coming out. And what, you're just going to leave? Like, you're just going to go and not be around your family and trust this guy who completely like spun your life out of control with your kids, with your family, and you're not going to be there? Oof, that would be tough.
So basically I did an intensive, it was 4 days, which they say is it's worth about 5 years of therapy. So it's a lot, and it's very intense.
I
It
don't
is
know
exactly
about
what
that.
it is. But I went there.
I mean, maybe this place is like the greatest thing ever, but a 4-day intensive replacing 5 years of therapy sounds like a Tony Robbins event.
With literally, I think what I learned is I had no voice. I lost everything. And so when I got to on-site, you know, the process is you kind of fill out a form. It's a little questionnaire that they give you online. You send it in, and then you get to on-site, and it's like your phones are taken, everything's gone. And then I met my therapist, and we go to this room. It's just our room. And from as soon as I got there, I knew, well, I didn't really, but I knew that it was on. Like, from the moment I stepped into the room, he was so sweet. I can't even remember his name. Doesn't matter. But we got in there, and from the moment we got in there, he was like, okay, this is going to be our room for the next 4 days. Where would you like to sit? Or what would you like to sit on? And I was like, he said, there's a couch, there's a seat. You can sit on a cushion on the floor. You can just sit crisscross on the floor, wherever you want. And I was like, I don't care, whatever. And he was like, no, you need to pick. Just choose a seat. And I was like, I honestly don't care. Where do you want me to sit? Like, I don't care. And from that moment, I knew that this was going to be a long journey, because then for the next 30 minutes, he asked me a bunch of questions. Where do you want to sit? And I had to pick where I wanted to sit. Where do you want to sit in the room? Where do you want me to sit in the room? And he was asking me, and I'm like, I don't freaking care. Like, just sit anywhere. Like, just sit. But I was learning that I didn't know how to make decisions. I didn't know how to say what I wanted. I didn't know how to say what I really felt. And so for 4 days, I had to get in touch with myself. And it was probably the hardest. It was so hard. I'm sure people can relate. Maybe they can't, but it was really exhausting. But I learned so much. I got to the bottom of feeling how my body felt with trauma, how my body felt with just connecting to the world and like to anyone around me. So we did all these, you do all these different exercises, and it's a lot of work, and it's literally from like 9 to 6 full day. You get a break for lunch and dinner, and then you go to bed. But it was a lot. It helped me so much, though. I came home with such clarity, and we went through every question. It was the first time I'd felt like I had help for myself. Like, someone saw me, someone knew me, and someone was like pushing me to be a better person and to really use my voice. And so I came back and I did use my voice with you. And
you did.
That's good. I'm glad she had that resource to help her. I can't help but think about her saying like, I didn't have a voice and I wasn't able to kind of like speak up for myself. But then we compare it to kind of Leona's story, where she says that Laura told her if she said anything about what Carl had done to her, not only would she be ruining Carl's reputation, she would be ruining her own, and then also her acting out physically and assaulting Leona, according to her own words. And I guess in my mind initially those two things were contradictory, where it's like, well, what do you mean you don't have your own voice? Because you very much used your voice to intimidate Leona. But I guess it does make sense when you're like, like that might not have been something that she was saying because it was her own feelings. It was maybe something where she was trying to, and this is not an excuse, but it's like she's acting out of, I got to keep things under wraps for my family. I got to make sure I'm protecting Carl, whether or not it's good for me, whether or not this is something that I want to do. This is keeping things clean and tidy for the public. This is protecting me. This is protecting my husband, my family, my church, my job. Like, so, yeah, that's a complex kind of thought process to have of speaking up for yourself and what that actually looks like, as opposed to maybe speaking out in ways where it's not maybe necessarily what you're feeling or what you're wanting to say, because it's what you truly feel. It's out of, I can't speak up in my own marriage. I can't speak up to my husband about this thing. And so I have to take it out on whoever I can take it out on, maybe. That's just speculation. But that was just kind of the thought that was going through my head.
It's hard to hear and beautiful to hear. I loved one of the things that started to change was you having an opinion that you didn't apologize for, and your laughter. That came a little bit later, but I know it started, that valve began to release, and because you're extremely funny, and that had left a lot in our marriage because there was no fun to be had. You were trying to survive, trying to make sense of it, and that was gone from our household. And when that started to return, I think even our kids, like you make your kids laugh just by your accent, which makes no sense. It's Australian.
Well, I'm constantly teased.
So, but yeah, it was cool to see you and to hear you realize it's not fun to be the guy when the spouse comes back from on-site, because you're so matter of fact. Yeah, you have had a hand in me not having a voice anymore.
Well, it was to the point, like I can talk about this, when I did one of the exercises, and it was 3 hula hoops, and they represented me, you, and our life. And he wanted me to make them connect. Like, how would you put this? Like, how do these work with your life? And I stood there for 20 minutes. I could not, like, moving these stupid hula hoops around, I couldn't figure out how to make it work. And I kept asking him, like, does this look right? Like, do I do it like this? And he's like, it drove me insane. But it was that point where I realized I had nothing outside of you and outside of our kids and our church. And so I had to really find myself. And so I came back really focused on realizing that I was codependent, that I had become codependent in our relationship, and everything I did was for everyone else. And so I had to really, like, I didn't know the only thing I knew that I loved was being at the ocean. That was like, when we were able to leave New York, someone asked, where do you want to go? And I said, I just want to be near the beach. That's all I knew. And
makes sense.
So that feeling of, like, understanding what I wanted, I didn't know what I needed. And so that was a full journey. That was probably a year of that, trying to figure out what I loved, what I wanted to do with my life, what I wanted to. So when we got to Florida, that was the best, because I found someone that helped me with that side as well, but that's for later. But yeah, it was definitely a journey, finding my voice.
Huge, impacting. I went before, so 2 days after all of our stuff exploded, I was so suicidal that Dino and Bob Goff, a couple men that have never left our corner, just somehow I got there. I don't know how I got there. And how I describe on-site, it's where they broke me in a bunch of pieces, then they just send you home.
Yeah.
And so
but you came back so excited.
I did, because on-site was where I found out that there's hope for me.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to get it done.
It's funny to hear him say that Bob Goff was there and, like, encouraging him to get treatment, because Bob Goff is a speaker and an author, and he's a very like, positive and encouraging voice when you hear him speak. So it's just like, oh, okay, yeah. So he encouraged Carl to go get treatment, go get some help. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's weird when you hear, it doesn't surprise me that Carl and Bob Goff know each other, but it's like, another connection there. Interesting.
But the choices I've made, they're my responsibility. The decisions I've made, my responsibility. Where some of the origin of the stuff that came from and caused me to become a person that could do that, not my responsibility. And I'll get into that in a second, but that was huge for me because at that point I was just so filled with my own self-loathing. I had written myself off.
Right.
And I left on-site going, I don't know what I'm going to do, but there might be hope for me. There might be hope for me yet. So we're in LA, and at that same time, I could feel myself spiraling. And when I talk about a spiral, if you find out you're caught up in compulsive living, you can't control or you feel like you can't control your compulsions and desires, and it becomes a pattern, cycle. And I basically told you, we were sitting on the beach, and I said to you, I'm not going to make it. I feel like I'm going to do exactly what I've done. And that's pretty much always been my cycle. There'd be a cycle that would include things that I hate, and then all of a sudden you go through the shame, and then the regret, and then the remorse, then the loathing, and do it again. So the cycle sometimes can be months in between some of that stuff happening. And I just said, I'm right on the doorstep. Like I know, and I feel like I can't control myself. I want to go somewhere to get real help. And you said to me, yes, I agree with you. You know, if you do this again, there is no second chance. There's nothing. We're done. And I might even leave now. But I want you to know, I hope it goes well. And I think it's going to be something that helps you. And I'm believing for the best. And that was a crazy day. And I went to a rehab in Wickenburg, Arizona, that specialized in all different types of addictions and mental breakdown. And I went there knowing that I had issues. And I found out when I was there that I was dealing with multiple addictions.
Well, you found out first at on-site, I think, that you had
an anxiety disorder and chronic depression.
Yeah.
And that all happened at on-site.
Right.
So I came home from on-site knowing that I'm chronically depressed, unmedicated, have an anxiety disorder, and I didn't think I had any anxiety. Turns out that I internalized it so deeply that it just became a part of who I was. And I found out I had some childhood trauma that...
oh, sorry, I'll let him finish that sentence.
Produced some things in me that I did not see coming. And then so when I got to this rehab...
Okay. But what I was going to say is it's interesting because in the docuseries, Carl talks about how he was diagnosed with ADHD, and in college in college or after college, around that time, he started taking Adderall for his ADHD diagnosis, and eventually he started abusing it. He said that he didn't tell anybody, he didn't tell doctors, but I mean... He said that he was just taking more and more to kind of maintain the pace that he was running as the lead pastor of HILLSONG, New York. And so something that did make me feel kind of bad for Carl, because I do have empathy for him regarding certain things. Like on a certain level, I definitely have empathy for Carl. HILLSONG was growing and expanding at a pace that was clearly not sustainable, especially when the leaders of HILLSONG don't actually care about the ministry. They care about the influence that they can have on others, and they care about the money and how they look to the general public. And I think that that's something that Brian Houston very much cares about. And so you kind of have fruit of a poisonous seed that isn't going to produce anything good beyond a certain point. And at one point, Carl was talking to Brian, saying how he was just struggling to keep up with doing 7 services on every Sunday, which to me, that is so unsustainable. Like that is a wild thought to have, that you are doing 7 services every Sunday live. You are speaking at those live every Sunday. And the way that HILLSONG does their services, it's not just like here, let me tell you about this Bible verse, and this is what the Bible said, And here's what I think we can take from it. And that's what we learned. It's not just like here's a rehearsed speech. It's Carl getting himself worked up. People said like a service never went by without Carl crying. So imagine you're doing that 7 times every Sunday. You're getting yourself worked up and you're amped and you're yelling and you're getting people on their feet 7 times in a day. So he's telling Brian, like, this is really tough for me. Like, it's getting hard for me to sustain doing 7 services on Sunday. And Brian tells him, well, at your age, I was doing 11. So yeah, that's hard to keep up with. Does not surprise me that Carl would be struggling with anxiety. Does not surprise me that he would be struggling with depression. And I do feel bad for him. Yeah, like I'm sure that he was under a really intense amount of pressure as the lead pastor of Hillsong New York. He was very public facing, not only just because he was a pastor of a successful church, but then that was like the church that the celebrities were going to. And so he also had a secular audience that was looking at him. And so that is a lot. And I do have empathy for that. And then I don't know how much Carl's going to share about this. He did just allude to it, so we'll chat about it briefly. Carl did share in the docuseries that he was abused as a child. He was sexually abused as a child, and that he never sought help for it. He never like worked through it in any sort of capacity, like professional capacity. He never had help understanding what happened to him and how that impacted him growing up. And so, of course, that is an awful thing, and I do feel horrible that he experienced that, and I hope that he is recovering well. I mean, I'm glad that he went and did get like professional help with processing it, so I just hope that he continues to heal well from that. On a somewhat related note, I'm interested to know if Carl has any opinions that he'll be sharing on if his view of Brian Houston has changed since Carl has started processing that trauma, because Brian was accused of and stood trial for essentially the accusation that he covered up the sexual abuse of a minor that was allegedly committed by his father. And Brian was found, he was acquitted of those charges, so he is not legally responsible in any capacity for that accusation. However, one of Frank Houston's alleged victims has spoken out publicly and said that Brian knew. Like, he accused Brian of knowing. He said that at one point when he started speaking out, he met with Frank at a McDonald's, and Frank put like $10,000. He put, the number $10,000 on a napkin and was like, I'll give you this if you agree to forgive me and stop talking about it. And the guy was like, he was an adult at this point, but he was kind of flabbergasted and like didn't know what to do. And so he signed the napkin and then did not receive the money. And so he called Brian and was like, hey, I met with your dad. He said he'd give me $10,000. I haven't heard anything. Like, I told him I would forgive him and I signed that napkin, so I don't really know what's going on. And Brian said he would like take care of it, but that also this man should know that it's his fault what happened to him for tempting his father. Again, this is all alleged. Frank, when all of these accusations came out about him abusing children, he had a doctor who had been in the inner circle of Hillsong for upwards of 20 years declare him incompetent by diagnosing him with dementia, so that way he couldn't speak out against any of the allegations that had been leveled against him. So all around, just an awful situation, an awful set of circumstances and actions allegedly taken by Frank and Brian and committed separately against Carl. But I do wonder if that impacts how Carl views about Brian now, because I don't think he has a very positive view of him at this point. But we'll hear what they say.
It was, the drive from the airport to the thing is about an hour and a half into the dead of night desert. And you get there and you have to give your phone away, and they search you, and you go through a big medical examination, and they basically shut the door behind you. And I remember that day going, this is it for
Real.
me. Like,
Well,
I
and it
can't
was-
believe I'm.
And I couldn't
yeah.
talk to you for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
The first 2 weeks. So, and this was over Christmas time.
Yeah, and our
So my
kids are
first
still
Christmas-
wondering what's going on. And then I leave to go to a rehab. You're by yourself
I was by myself at Christmas with the 3 kids.
with the kids.
on the other side of the country that we just
Yep.
moved to.
And right before that was Thanksgiving, where we were headed to a friend's house that called 5 minutes before we left and said, hey, we don't want you to come anymore. So our kids were like, well, why aren't we going to Thanksgiving at this person's house? And I'm like, you know what? Our plans have changed. And everybody was kind of reeling from that. And that's still painful because that's more kid stuff that isn't deserved. Like, I get it.
I mean, Ava's talked about that. She
Yep.
said that during that time, she didn't know if you were coming back.
Right.
Because she was how old? 15?
15.
16?
Yeah.
And so the anxiety, she started to have some anxiety issues. Stomach issues
Yeah, of
started
course.
from that, which
Yeah.
we didn't realize until a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
When she started talking about it, she's like, I think that's when I started to get anxious. I didn't know if Dad was coming back from when he went away in LA because everything was so up and like just crazy.
Fast
They just,
and crazy.
because Charlie had come back from her hospital
We
stay.
don't live in New York anymore.
Well, after she was done with the hospital, we left from New York the next day and moved to LA. So everyone was just
reeling.
It was awful.
So I'm in
Yeah, I bet.
I'm in that rehab, and you know that place to me is it's the word they use a mental picture called hugging the cactus. That's what real recovery
feels
looks
like,
like.
yeah.
And you can leave anytime you want, and I definitely tried to leave twice, maybe 3 times even.
Well, I said I told someone to tell you
If you leave early.
if you leave early, don't come back here.
Yeah, and no talking for 2 weeks, and then you start getting letters. And, you know, I read some of them a couple months ago. We were looking through it. And I don't like, even looking back on the letters, so you sit there, and I think the feeling of being an utter failure overwhelms you when you're at a rehab, and you're just there, like, what has my life become? And I remember reading Ava's beautiful handwriting when she basically said, Dad, I love you. Yeah, she said, Dad, I love you. And rehab's going to be great because they're going to help you fix some of the broken pieces.
How does that feel as a dad?
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. Because I'm like, I don't need my baby girl encouraging me. This is not the
Yeah, imagine getting that letter from your 15-year-old. It's just like, you are such a sweet child, and it's filled with so much grace and love to send that letter to your dad, but you shouldn't have to. Like, you should not. Everybody needs help every now and then. Everybody has issues. Like, and if you are going through something, of course, absolutely get help and like do what you need to do to make sure that you are healthy. But just imagining like your 15-year-old having her entire life turned upside down, parents lose their jobs, you move across the country, something very clearly is wrong. Oh, this is what's going to come out about Dad. Dad's now gone and she doesn't know if he's coming back, and she's having so much anxiety. It's just like my heart hurts for Ava.
time. And it definitely set me up though to stick it out. And yeah, I found out early on, I found out that I had developed a drug addiction, and that was hard to hear because it was a part of my life for so long, and it was prescribed, and I obviously started to abuse it. And so I was a full-fledged drug addict on top of everything else, and with some of my compulsion issues that, led to things that you never think of me doing when it comes to infidelity.
That's very interesting. I found out I was a drug addict. I don't know. That to me feels like a way of avoiding responsibility, of saying like I found out, as opposed to I had to confront the fact that I was an addict, or I had to admit not only to myself but to the people that I was working with and getting help from that I was an addict. Instead, I found out, like, this was a surprise to me. I didn't know that I was abusing a prescribed drug.
Just lying. I found out that I was molested, as a young boy. And when that happens, your brain chemistry is altered. And once they broke it down for me, I realized, yeah, this is a significant part of who I am that I have left unaddressed, unattended.
And that you downplayed.
That I downplayed my whole life. And I was so mad most of the time at rehab. I was so mad because I'm like, this is such...
The use of I found out in that scenario, I feel very differently about, because it could have been something that he was just like completely repressing, not wanting to think about, not wanting to have in the forefront of his mind, or like not really wanting to fully label it as that. Maybe like in his head, he was downplaying it as like, oh, maybe I'm remembering wrong. It wasn't that bad. Maybe I just misunderstood what was happening. But then in speaking with a professional, it's like, oh, okay, no, like this is what happened. So yeah, I think the term, like, I found out that I was molested as a child, when he uses that, I feel very differently about it than him saying I found out I was a drug addict. And plus, when something like that happens to somebody, they can use whatever words and language that they feel fits best to describe it.
A clear reason why couldn't God save me a different way, And that I spent every other day mad, because I'm like, this isn't fair, I've got, and they teach you, and it's good for me to re-highlight on our own podcast, when you give reasons for why you failed, it is not an excuse.
Right.
If we don't give people reasons, nobody can grow from our story. There is no excuse for what I did.
Right.
None. And there's still reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So the reasons are what they are. They don't change my consequence. They don't change the fact that it's my responsibility. But when I found out that sexual abuse to a child in that way can alter you and begin a life pattern of secrecy and hiding and secrecy and hiding, and you don't even know why.
Protecting yourself.
I don't know why I'm lying. I don't know why I'm lying. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know. And slowly but surely, I remember going in there feeling like a block of ice, and I felt like every day I would melt a little bit.
Well, the first letter I got from you that I burst into tears was when you said, I've realized I've got a drug addiction.
Yeah.
And I feel so different. And I bawled my eyes out, because one of my things that I'd been praying for years was the fact that I knew, I could see it, that it was like what was prescribed to you, but it was not good. Like, it was not doing you good. And anytime I'd try to bring it up, it was like, it's like when you talk to an addict, they're going to give you the pushback.
Yeah.
So it just was always an awful conversation. So when you did that, when you sent me that letter, I bawled my eyes out, and I felt such a relief. And so then it just gave me hope for whatever else was coming for the next 6 weeks of you being there. So yeah, that was amazing.
What you learn in rehab is tools to stop manipulating everything around you. And I had learned ways to manipulate situations and people so I could function how I needed to function. And when you go to a place like that, there's just nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide. And there were some really tough, hard moments. But sticking that out is one of my proudest victories as a man.
Can you talk about, sorry, keep going.
No, go ahead.
Can you talk about one of the most significant moments that helped you in rehab?
Which one?
I was thinking about you talking to your little self.
Oh, man.
Because I think people think rehab is just maybe sitting in a room and like recover, like trying to recover from whatever addiction you have. What was the work like? Like,
Yeah.
I just remember you talking about this one part that was very.
Yeah. Let me get there. I'm just going to take a breath. I think, and my tears still work. I understand.
They're
that
real.
Someone was asking, maybe it was my daughter, did your dad always used to cry when he preached? And were those tears real? And I'm proud to say they're real. I understand the question. I understand the criticism even. But crying was a healthy part of my life before. One of the few. And it has carried over, might even be worse. So my tears are my tears. They come out, they come out. I wish I could do it on command. Not that good, not that special. Yeah, so you go through it. You go through a thing where they help you dig into the age you were when that abuse happened, and it's hard. You know, it's you just don't want to go there. And when you first get to rehab, there's a bunch of grown men walking around with stuffed animals, and you're like, man, what are these guys doing with stuffed animals? They're like, oh, have you been to week 3 yet? I'm like, no. Like, you'll see. It's like Fight Club. And then we go through our own, and I remember, as I'm sitting there with the therapist, and you do it with 3 other guys that are in your learning pod, after we start talking for a little bit, I remember grabbing my otter, like a stuffed otter, and I remember like leaving that thing after a lot of stuff went down in that session and walking around with my stuffed animal. And I would see new guys. They'd be like, what's with the stuffed animal? I'd be like, you'll see. But they force you to go back to that age where you were damaged and begin to speak life into it and begin to understand yourself and begin to understand what happens to a brain at that age. And I had a beautiful family, a beautiful upbringing. I love my mom and dad. They're amazing. It just was one horrible situation with a house guest. As a parent, it's your worst nightmare because we've all been there. You trust people, and I was violated. I was abused. And it caused a lot of wreckage. And I'm going to use it. And I don't know if I'll ever not be emotional.
I don't think you will.
I don't think I will.
Yeah.
It's hard to think about what it was like to be lost before knowing some of these answers. And so you get to this place where you start talking to this kid. They make you write a letter with your left hand, which looks eerily like the age everybody was. And it just began a journey for me of being kind to myself and being patient with myself.
Because what you didn't realize was you hated yourself. I mean, worse than that, you loathed.
Yeah. There are parts of me, with loathing that
I didn't know how he was going to describe working through that, like talking to your younger self, when you're working through, like, this is the age that this thing happened and let's process it. But in my head, the kind of like teal swan approach popped up, where you have the other people in your group like play certain members of your family and they like channel them and personify them, and there's a lot of like screaming and tears, and it seems very not only dramatic but traumatic to kind of reenact this awful thing that happened to you. So I was a little bit afraid that that's where they were going to go with it, but as like a lay person who is not in the mental health space at all whatsoever, it does seem a little bit healthier to speak kindly to the younger version of yourself and to allow yourself to be vulnerable and to carry around a stuffed animal and to write a letter to yourself. It just speaking life and love into who you were at that time, and probably saying like, this is not your fault. You did not do anything wrong. I love you. You're worthy. Just like imagining some of the things that somebody might say. This approach, again, to like a non-professional sounds a much healthier approach than what Miss Teal Swan gives us.
I didn't understand, because I dealt with the up and down of a compulsive issue, addiction, my whole life. And you just start to hate yourself. You start to hate that part of you. And then you learn you got to bring that part out, and you have to talk to it, speak to it, look at it. give it help. Repressing it doesn't work.
Right.
Hating it doesn't work. Using bad Christian doctrine about praying more
Praying in a
does
way.
not work.
Right.
And that's where I found out I will not be a victim to the situation. And they start to give you language for that. And now I don't look at my abuse as something that destroyed my life. I look at it as something that has helped me be a catalyst for healing in my own life and hopefully for other people. So I sit here today with years of sobriety as a recovering addict, and I'm proud of that. It's awesome. But more than that, I sit here with a whole lot of compassion. And because I know so many people have been through similar things, and they haven't had the opportunity to go where I went.
Right.
And yes, my failures were in public, and that is bad. It's very hard, but I don't know if it's worse to fail in private where nobody knows and you just have to deal with it. So I look at it now, even that is a blessing, because if you watched my life blow up in public, please keep watching. Yeah. You know, you owe it to yourself to see where the story goes.
I'm here.
So I'm an example of somebody that made huge mistakes, and rather than just try to not get caught again, I wanted to change. And there's a part of you that's like, how quickly can I repair this so I can, move on? And you see it all the time in ministry. Like, dudes will go through stuff, and then a month later they're doing it again, whether it's starting a new church. And I cannot judge those people. All I know for me is it took me decades to get where I was. And it wasn't going to fix itself in a couple of months. You really, really got to excavate. You got to break it all down. Sometimes you have to completely allow life, God, to break it down for something better to be built. And that's my story for sure. I lost a lot in that fire. I lost a lot. But what came out of it was a different human being. And I'm here today, very, very, very involved in our recovery community. I did have a relapse, and that was a couple of months after I got back from rehab. And pride is a thing that dies slowly. But I remember talking to the nurses before I left. They give you an outpatient plan, and they're like, a lot of guys struggle, and there is, relapse potential. And I'm like, I'm not going to relapse.
Which I think every
I'm like, I'm going to be the only guy who never relapses.
Right.
And they teach you how to live a life where you draw circles. There's an outer circle, which is super healthy behavior. There's a middle circle, which is danger ground. It's stuff you can't avoid as an addict, as a recovering addict, but it's stuff that you really need to be mindful of. And then there's an inner circle, which is a complete relapse, got to go back. Yeah. And when I had my relapse, only a couple months, maybe 3-4 months after getting back, I remember looking at you and explaining the situation as if it was already over. Like, hey, I this is what happened, and I'm sorry. I understand. If you go, I understand. I've got no more chances here. I don't see this like that. I didn't know that this particular thing was going to trip me up like that, and I know that I can fix it. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it, if you'll allow me. And you were really gracious with me. I don't know where you dug to find that kind of grace, but it's a real part of our story, and it's important that people know that, because I know a lot of people try to get sober and they fail. It's a terrible feeling. And I'm not sitting up here, as a guy who I've been there. I'm there today. I've got to stay sober today. I've got to stay recovered today, and I've got to do it again tomorrow. But I like being able to look at guys and say, man, I'm sure you've been humiliated. I have been too. I'm sure your situation was bad. Mine was real bad. Yeah. And I'm sure you feel discouraged because you might have relapsed. I've been there. But there's hope. Right. And so that's what the rehab part of this story for me was powerful. I don't know. I've already been able to help a couple other people get there, and that's a joy. It's beautiful. And between the two of us doing the work that we've done, we're sitting here, very different people, but really grateful for it.
You are a very different person.
All other issues or feelings aside, I do think it's really great for Carl to talk about sobriety and relapse, and how everybody has that thought of well, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to be the one who relapses, and then you do, and then he had to kind of admit it and get back on okay, we're going back on the correct path that I want to take. and just being honest about it and using his experience to help other people. I think that that's a really great thing to spend your time doing.
And I think that's been hard for me. It's been sad because the people that have left our life, I feel like, if they, you were a great friend, a great person before this, but you're an even better person now. Like, you're such a different person. And I think I saw someone put up the other day on Instagram something along the lines of that, like, people remember where you were, but it's a shame that they don't stick around to see what you become.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I mean, I think that we've got a lot of friends that have stuck around and it's been amazing, but I just want to say publicly, I'm proud of who you are.
Thank you, love.
And the man that you've become and the work that you put in every day to be that person. I know it's not easy. I know any addiction isn't easy to overcome, but you do it really well day by day, and you're very conscious of it, and I see it.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge it.
I was also thank you. I was heavily addicted to my own opinion.
Right.
Which is a very sinister, but just as deadly, addiction. And yeah, I'm grateful for where we sit. Some people that left, we'll talk about friendships in depth, but I think it's hard when you go through a valley and people leave and you get out of the valley and they might come back and you're so different that it's like, God, we don't.
Got nothing to.
We're not the same people. So it's like you had to leave for your reasons, but when you're not with somebody in the fire, you can't understand what the fire smells like, what it feels like, because you chose to leave. The reasons don't need to get judged. You just weren't there.
Yeah.
And so you miss that part of someone's life, and that's not on them. That's on me. That's on the person that made the mistake. Because you don't have to go through valleys with people. You don't. And so that is something we found, though, is that when we do catch up with some people, in our heart, we're like, don't feel sorry for us.
Yeah, we're good.
I know you say you're praying for me, but I'm kind of praying for you as
You're still in it.
So that's been new to be
okay.
I know, like, you might leave and feel sorry for me. Don't. Don't.
The feeling of freedom that you have when you are honest and living with no secrets. What is it? No secrets, no lies.
No secrets, no lies. No untalked about triggers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super
Powerful.
freeing and very powerful. So it's sometimes when I see people, I'm like, oh, you still have to live like that.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Okay.
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there. With relationships.
That tone was a little bit judgy. I'm not sure if it was intentionally like patronizing, but sounded like it a little bit.
Brian and
Brian.
Bobby and our relationship to Hillsong. For those of you who don't know, that the church we were a part of was a part of a bigger picture. And when I let people down, it began like a cascade of things that were discovered and happening. And what my relationship like, what do I think about Brian?
Yeah, what's your how do you feel about that now? Because I know people ask that.
They do.
Well, they want
Tell
you
me.
to be like
a
certain way.
I mean, I will always love Brian and Bobby, no question. Love is a choice. I choose that. I choose to love them.
Okay.
My experience with Brian up until my epic failure was he was a hero to me. Really pulled me out of the crowd and just said, I believe in you, and gave me opportunity, gave me trust. I never once felt like I went through any battles that he didn't have my back.
Right.
We got along really well most of the time, and then as I got older, towards the end of my time at Hillsong NYC, we had difference of opinions a lot, which he was always relatively cool with. He always left room for that. We definitely butted heads, and we definitely had some issues, and had it not gone down like it did, I probably would have still left, but it wouldn't have been bad. Yeah. And so my overriding sentiment of
because he and Brian had a conversation about Carl potentially leaving Hillsong, and then Carl ended up not. This was before like any of the news broke about anything. This was when Hillsong was still kind of in a positive light publicly.
About Brian is that I'm grateful I'm really grateful for him because I've been taught too good to stop it where the tragedy is. So how I feel about Brian now, very different. I was crushed by what happened. But before that, if you had to ask me what that man means to me, I'm grateful for him. You know, he gave me a lot of trust and let me do something that will always be a really, really special part of my life. To be able to plant that church in the middle of the greatest city on earth and to see it explode was far beyond what we ever thought could happen. And so I'm grateful for Brian.
I think he was extremely proud of us for that. For some reason at the end, it kind of it was twisted, but for the most part, like you know.
I think the hardest part of that was that the narrative was shifted so quickly from him being a second dad to me, proud of me, tight as a drum, to like, this guy is a renegade, vagabond, always been doing it. Like, all this stuff started coming out. And I was so like, man, that's not the way this was.
Yeah.
And then to find out that I wasn't the only one that had some things that weren't talked about, that's what shocked us the whole time anyway, is that we saw this stuff going down and we would see interviews and media, and I kept thinking, well, I know so much. They must not think I'm going to say anything because this is outrageous. Like, I could do one interview and put all this to bed and out a lot of people about a lot of things.
And I think that might have been the motivation probably for why they kept doing things. Yeah. Because your reaction naturally would be to do that.
Yeah. I think they were preparing
for that. And I think they were
preparing
for that. So they did all this, and it's like, oh, you didn't like.
I wonder if the conversation was, we got to hit him before he hits us, because he's definitely going to say something. Yeah. And I do know about a lot of stuff.
Right.
But I haven't found it constructive on this side of the situation to talk about other people's business. That stuff comes out on its own. Okay. We have never, and I don't know if we will. I mean, it's a point now where it's like, cool, I do have a microphone again.
Right.
And I don't expect people to talk as recklessly now that they know that I'm not just going to fade off into, oblivion.
Well, I was
going to say, everybody sounds right until they're cross-examined. And one of the hardest parts of this was watching things be said with no defense at all. It was like, whatever you wanted to say about us, about the church, nobody was saying anything. And I found out a lot.
And I caught a glimpse of myself in the viewfinder, and I realized that doing reaction videos like this, and also my tendency to just not have a poker face, is probably why I have such deep 11 lines in my forehead. Because I am just sitting here like perplexed and scowling and being like, where is this going? What do we make of all of this? Where does this start to unblur into a focused image where I can understand how you feel about Brian now? Because we're getting a lot of like, oh, I'll always love Brian. He picked me out of a crowd. We had a great relationship. Well, people were talking a little bit reckless when I didn't have a mic, but now I've got a mic, and people were saying things unchecked, but everybody sounds right until you hear the other side. And I just want the details. Maybe he legally can't, though, due to like NDAs, because Hillsong did have people sign NDAs. So I don't know. Maybe that's preventing him from speaking freely about certain things, but I would love more specific, detailed answers
during that time. And I feel like there's an old adage: you find out what you're worth to somebody when you can offer them nothing. And if that's true, and there are times in my life I felt like it's true, it seemed like the moment I couldn't offer Hillsong Church, the church that we were a part of our whole lives, anything, well, the reaction and response was like, man, I don't know if I really mattered, because I can't offer anything. In fact, I'm taking. And it was such a swift, hardcore cut that it shocked me. And it shouldn't have, because that has been our culture.
Right.
When we were a part of Hillsong Church, that's just what we did. We'd be at global retreats, and there'd be a guy who was a pastor there for 2 decades up until then, and then you'd show up and he's gone, and we'd be like, hey, where's that guy? Oh, he's gone. He left, he got fired, whatever. And we'd be like, oh, good riddance. We'd laugh and make a joke about it.
Yeah.
I just never thought it was going to be me.
Right.
So it was. And so it stopped surprising me, because I was like, of course, that's what we do. But my thing was the culture of cover-up. That's what the culture that we had. And if anybody says anything different, they don't know the situation. What I mean by cover-up is there was a time in my life where I felt like cover up could be switched out for the word protection.
Protect.
And I
right.
now look at it when I was involved in things that were covering things up for other people.
Mm-hmm.
My whole life as a pastor in different, there were some times where it was protection, where people don't need to know, but there was other times where it should have been brought to light. And the way we
Right.
operated at Hillsong Church was, if it benefits us to be honest, we're going to be real honest. If it doesn't, we're going to be really private. And so the motivation wasn't what's best or what's right per se. It was what works best for us and our brand and our church name. And that's cool. You got to make your decisions. But that's what happened.
Yeah.
So if there's any other narrative about it, I'm sorry. We lived it. We're there. And for us, it turned out it was better for the church to make me look even worse than I made myself look. Because it evidently, I think their logic, even they handled it so bad. And I think the logic was, the more we put on him, the less it's going to come our way.
Yeah.
And having said all that, babe, again, to go back to the truth of it, it's my fault that they were in the situation.
Right.
How they handled it, great. People can pick it apart for days, and it does deserve some commentary and some criticism. But to go back to the original impetus of it, it was me. So I have lost so much bitterness and frustration about what people's response was to my actions because of the ability to own my own failures.
Right.
And that's consuming. I don't even have time to be mad anymore about what this guy said or what this guy meant. That's freeing.
Yeah.
So when you're in a situation like this, I never want to forget, let me just work on my side of the tracks. But yeah, that's for you to get cut off by our church was extra hard because it was even more your life than it was mine. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was hard because my whole life has been church.
Yeah.
And so when I was cut out of that, which of course I would be because I'm married to you, so it had to be that way. I mean, it wasn't like I wanted to stay around, you know what I mean? But I think it was just the fact that you just kind of left.
Yeah.
And I never heard from anyone. Bobby did reach out a bunch for months and months, and it was very sweet. But I just, because of what was happening in the media, I found it really hard to try and text back because I was like, this is so, it felt fake to me because of all the shit that they were saying and my kids having to every time something came up, it was another wave for me of just getting hit by betrayal, hit by this anxiety that I just wanted it to go away. Like, we weren't saying anything. Why is anyone else saying anything? Like, it was just so hard for me to understand because I felt like just thrown out in that setting. And so she did reach out a lot, which I appreciated. But then I finally just had to say and be really honest as I found my voice. I had to text her, and I texted her what I did and just said all the things I had to say. I don't understand this. I don't know why you didn't protect us here. I don't know why
are people lying there.
You had these people, you let them whilst on staff say things about me and my husband that aren't true and aren't true. And they didn't protect us. And so I said all of that, and that was it. I never heard from her again.
She never wrote you back on that one.
And
Of course she never wrote you back because Bobby wasn't checking in on you because she cared about your well-being and wanted to be there for you. Bobby, the wife of Brian Houston, of Hillsong, like Brian and Bobby and Hillsong as a brand are going to say whatever they can to cover themselves. They're going to throw accusations to distract from the improprieties that they've been committing. But then when they talk smack about you publicly, Bobby's going to, or when they allow somebody else to, when there's a spokesman who says something or another staff member who says something, they're going to let him say it. And then Bobby's going to slide in and be like, hey, just want to check in on you. Just want to make sure you're doing okay. We're sure that this has been super hard. To keep the peace, to keep you guys from retaliating. Because like you said, they knew how much stuff you guys knew that you guys could have said. And so it's like tending to you and making sure like, you're not going to come out and say anything crazy, right? Like you're not going to act irrational. Are you okay? Because just know I love you. I love you and I care about you. And then when Laura's like, so what's up with this then? What's this about? Nothing. No response. That does not surprise me.
another
okay,
part of culture, like
yeah.
when you stand up for yourself like that,
right.
all the nice
But I
text
needed
stop.
I needed to say it and move on. And
Yeah.
it's been hard because I miss them. They were like my second parents. So,
Yeah.
and I miss a lot of things about
Oh yeah, and that's the thing.
the church.
Laura grew up knowing Brian and Bobby, like, since she was a little kid. Their families were super close, and she basically thought like they were actually related, is how close their families were. She thought of them as second parents. Oh no, you and your husband no longer serve the mission and the public image of Hillsong, so bye. We'll throw you under the bus.
We would say we still love, the
Yeah.
church. It is being scrutinized, and it really should be. As much as we love it, we're also really aware of things that we would have done different, that were done that are wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's hindsight. I feel like anybody who's about growth should be able to do that. You should be able to look back on anything you were a part of and say, I do something
Different.
this different and that different.
We were wrong
And
there.
We're
100%.
wrong there. And I think the response of Hillsong Church, from our view, is I've just been, we just stopped caring a long time ago and just walked away.
Yeah.
And I think people have said, well, if you're not guilty of things, why didn't you say something? And I said, well, number one, it wouldn't have mattered. But two, we also signed an NDA, which is a practice of most corporations and some churches. I'm not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but the way it works, and we didn't know any of this because I've never gotten fired before. We were told we had to sign this NDA in order to get half of a severance payment for like a year's salary, and you have no money. We were scrambling, didn't know what was going on, and it was not a lot of money, but if I didn't sign it, I couldn't have got anything. And
Ugh,
which I
so
now look back
scammy.
and I go, I didn't know that it was going to go the way it went. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to sign it, and because I'm not going to need to say anything.
Well, you're not thinking
No.
either. Like you're just like they were pretty forceful on it as well. Like
They
you
were.
need to sign this today.
And
And-
I didn't have to sign it.
You didn't.
And I should have had a lawyer present.
Yeah.
Didn't know what I was
Yep.
doing, but did it. I signed it. And I think that's why they went so hard, because they knew I couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because the NDA. I would have probably said something maybe, but I don't know about that practice. I feel like that practice is one that can be scrutinized, but that's what happened. So people are like, why didn't you say something early? I was like, well, I was petrified because I didn't want to lose the little bit of support that we had for my family. And I signed a freaking legal document that was so extensive. Back on it now, I'm like, what in
Yeah.
the
If you went
world?
over it now, it's pretty wild.
But that's in our past. But
Yeah.
people need to know that's the truth about it. And, it was a hard lesson to learn. Really, 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 really sorry for the position that I put a lot of people in Hillsong Church in. So what people need to understand is when you talk about churches that are failing, it's typically the leadership that's failing, and the amazing people that are part of it have nothing to do with that. That's how I feel about a lot of things that have to do with Hillsong. Is that there's some people that
bad leadership will kill anything faster than nearly anything else when it comes to a church, a business, whatever it may be. Bad leadership and bad decision making is it's poison to the entire organization.
made it difficult, and it got cloudy somewhere along the way. Started beautiful, was powerful, was going forward. Somewhere in there were some cracks, and it was hard to deal with the fallout and to watch everything in that regard crumble. But those are the consequences of my actions, and it was what it was.
So how do you feel like the media affected you or us? You especially, because there was a lot of stuff said.
Yeah. Really tough, really hard. If I'm being as honest as I can, it was brutal. I think we got very fortunate early to get the advice to stop pain shopping. And for those not familiar with that term, it means looking for things that are going to literally cause you pain. What can I find today that's going to make me sad? And it's actually a symptom of an unhealthy life. But I was a
used to
pain
do that
shopper
every day
early,
too. Yeah.
and it was also unavoidable.
Right.
You'd go to stores, and it was just heavily covered, and it made me stronger because it went at my number one. One of my deepest needs is to be understood.
Yes.
That has driven a lot of my life, to be understood and to be in my estimation, so misunderstood, and to be able to do nothing about it was just really hard. And again, it felt like nobody was standing up for anything. And here's what I learned in some of those hard moments. How stupid would it be for me to haggle about the details of my actions?
Mm.
Who's really struggling in that case? Like, so for me to call and clarify accounts that were very untrue, almost everything reported was spun to the way of whoever was saying it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that's my old pride again. Because the fact is, I have to go heal. I got to walk away. And it's like, no, it was this, not that. What are we talking about? I failed. I failed my wife. I failed my church. I failed myself. And that's what I'm going to focus on. And there will come a day where I'm going to sit on a podcast with a blue jacket and have my own microphone. And I will be able to speak to my own situation. And I trusted that that day would come. That day is here. It does feel really liberating to be able to say, no, I'm definitely going to speak to that now. You know, and it's not from a bitter place.
Right.
We're at a place just to give people information that will help them heal. And that's, so the media stuff, I would just say to people, please, especially the Christian media, pretty disappointed. What I found was the Christian media was just cutting and pasting tabloid stuff. I'm like, how far have we gotten where it's like, so that was tough. That was tough to see. But guess who put us in the position to have false things said? Me. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to never being in that position again.
You know, we went through a hard time as a family, and it was in the media, but we also went through a really hard time with a lot of our relationships. Friends that we thought were family ended up, you know, leaving or not being there for you, especially as a friend who has always been there for everyone else, who is a guy that will get on a plane for anyone at any time when they're in trouble. How did that make you feel with some of your close relationships that you lost?
Yeah, it's extremely hard, extremely painful, and sad, and then obvious, like of why this is happening. And I put a lot of people in a very, very difficult spot, and it took me a while. There's two.
Here's the thing. Of course, Carl and Laura have the added layer of all of the media attention. And so it's totally possible that people who chose to distance themselves from Carl and Laura were like, I just don't want any part of this. Like, you guys are being talked about in the press and I don't want to be connected to it. And so for those reasons, I'm out. Totally possible, like, because that is a layer of their situation. But I think for anybody who knows somebody who has engaged in an affair or a betrayal like that, when you find out about it, it makes it incredibly hard to trust that person. It makes you question so many different things, because if they've been lying about that, it's like, what else are you lying about? If you were the kind of person who can hide this thing, who can hide this affair from your friends, from your family, from your spouse, what kind of person are you? Like, it makes you question the quality of that person's character, because clearly they're displaying bad character and bad judgment. And so, like, you can't be surprised. And Carl's like, well, you know, it's like expected on a certain level that people will distance themselves. And it's like, yeah, it is. And there are people who will stay. There are people who will maintain that relationship and be like, look, if you want to fix this and you want to get better, I want to be there for you, and I want to be with you and walk through this with you and your spouse and do what I can to be there for you. But it's not unreasonable for somebody else to be like, I don't want any part of this because you've lied. You've exhibited bad judgment. You've made this choice over and over and over again to betray your family and your spouse, and that most likely involved lying to us about things. And so I'm not interested in maintaining a relationship with you. And I get for Carl and Laura, it's like, well, it's more than just an affair, because then they both ended up going into treatment facilities and therapy and counseling, and Carl's also struggling with an addiction that he has to now like work on overcoming and living in sobriety. And then he's also remembering things from his childhood that maybe he had, I mean, clearly he hadn't processed it yet. And so from Carl and Laura's perspective, it's like, oh, well, they didn't stay to help us when we needed them. But other people don't necessarily see it that way. They just see what's happening in front of them, and what's happening in front of them is the betrayal and the character qualities that they don't want to be associated with, and they don't want to be affiliated with, and they don't want to continue to like put themselves into a relationship where clearly you don't respect me, you don't care about me, because you weren't honest with me either. You didn't come to me and say like, hey, something's going on, I don't know what to do. Like I made these choices, and now I'm in this situation, and I don't know how I'm gonna, tell Laura about it. I don't know how I'm gonna come clean. I feel awful about it. He didn't ask for help from anybody. He just did it in private. He just committed the affairs in private. So it's kind of like nailing yourself to the cross to be like, we were going through such a hard time and people left. Well, yeah, but it's not because they didn't care about you going through a hard time, or Carl struggling with addiction or childhood trauma, because those things didn't come out until after. And at that point, I mean, you're living life not on social media, not in the public eye, so you're working through those things privately. And so how do you expect people to know, hey, it went a lot deeper than just me engaging in this affair? You know what I mean? So I don't really like this angle of the conversation.
Sides of you, there's the right, healing, healthy answer, and there's the broken side of you that has to have a voice. You don't have to express it, but you have to be honest about, because there was a time there I was trying to not even be honest with myself. Like, no, it's cool. I understand. I don't understand. And even be able to say that was a breakthrough for me, because I was so good at saying the right thing. And I had to have people dig out sometimes the wrong thing to start a new pattern in my life of not faking that stuff. So, oh yeah, my friends, they did what they did. It did hurt you. No, I get it. I didn't get it.
You would still protect them.
Yeah, I would.
You felt like you would.
And the truth is this:
what do you
the
mean
easy
protect
answer
them?
is when you break the trust of your friends, you don't have the right to criticize their reaction. Other people can, but as far as I'm concerned, the friends that I had, like the crew that I used to run with, that people would recognize, I don't talk to any of those guys substantially. Well, I don't talk to any of them except for one very lightly. And I did have one conversation with a friend that was preempted because we were going to see each other at a mutual friend's party, and I think he was worried about running into me. And yeah, it was what it was. We were on the phone. I'm like, hey, that's good to hear from you. And I know that you're calling me because you know we're about to run into each other. And I wasn't as healed then or as honest, so it might have been bad. When you're the one that broke the trust, you have to respect people's process and their dignity and whatever they have to do. In addition to that, there hadn't been a scandal like we were a part of in a long time, and everybody was really scared. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew it was true.
Right.
And I think people pull back from me because even if they were to ask me, how do they know what I'm saying is true?
Right.
It's not necessarily my friendship ethic. I do have my own version of friendship, what it means to me. And I had to learn I can't put that off on other people. It doesn't have to be yours. And who's to say mine's even healthy? Like when you talk about the getting on a plane to fly everywhere, that is what I used to do. And I don't know if it was healthy.
Right.
I had no boundaries. And so my biggest strength, yes, I do believe in loyalty. I do believe I could be there for friends. And there's not much you can do to get me out of your life. Like I actually prefer it when people are in trouble because I'm coming. And that's just how I'm wired. Not everybody's like that. We had one.
Because he wants to be the hero.
One of my friends actually say, I'm just not good at adversity.
Yeah, I'm not a friend that's built for adversity.
Well, that's an interesting, convenient way to say that. Cool. But at least he's self-aware enough to go, I'm not the adversity guy. If you're going through a tough time, you're going to have to find somebody else. I'm not wired like that. You know what else it did, though? It made me really question my motives. Because, when you do stuff for people. Do you do it so they will return? And like you take something like someone living in our house, or us giving somebody a car, or us doing what we can do for somebody. And then you look back at those same people who turn their back on you, and you immediately have to check, why did I do what I did in the first place? I did it because it was right. So I don't feel like, I don't have that bitter thing of like, I was there for you, but you weren't there for me. I didn't do it so you'd be there for me. I did it because I felt like it was right. And that's a really big temptation to feel wounded about that. And I got over it. And I got over, it's taken me a long time. I'm not going to like act like that was easy for me. It was not, because I love my friends. But I found out what kind of relationships I developed. And because of what I didn't know, some of the things I didn't know, I had areas of my life that were shut off to everybody. Nobody knew. And I was as intimate as I knew how to be, but didn't know that there was so much stuff that I wasn't honest about. So I have talked to some of my friends. Some have called and apologized. One guy said, I do it so differently. To which I said,
sweet.
Here's the truth. If it hadn't happened like that, I don't think I would have healed at the rate that we did.
Yeah.
Because if two of my best friends would have stuck around, I would have leaned on them, talked to them. I would have hid in there. But because they all scattered, it was like me, a mirror, and you. And that's all we had. We had to get to know each other.
Yeah.
We had to become best friends. We had to hang out with our children. There was nobody else to lean on. And I look back on it, and we had just enough of the right people.
Which
we didn't have
told,
extra,
which
didn't have
great.
Less. One of our friends said, you're going to have exactly who you need in this season.
At the right
and he
time.
was right. And as I look back, like everything, I look back on some of the lonely seasons, I'm like, had those people not left, it wouldn't have been the same for me. It's still painful, and it still was a bummer, but I love those guys. I wish them the best. Like I said, we're super different now. There are some relationships I'm still believing that will come back around.
Yeah.
It is a joy when in this season, when relationships drop back in your life and they do get healed and they get better. And there's some, like I said before, where you just shake the hand, you're like, we're never going to be.
Yeah.
We're never going to be like that again. Yeah, I get it. I get why you ran. But the reality is you definitely ran.
Yeah.
And so I know it exposed me. It exposed us. Let's all grow. And I think that's a good discussion for people to have. Like, what is the response when somebody goes through that? Let's look at it. We found it to be, very, very, very.
Well, it's a grieving.
Yeah.
It's literally like you're losing things. Yeah. For me, it was like I literally probably 2.5 at least, maybe even some of them still. I grieve the relationships we had. Yeah,
but babe, this is the part that I do get upset about, and I'm still working through, is the fact that we had friends that they were couples. You had your own relationships with them, and those people also abandoned you. Yeah. That's on me, not them, firstly, as I've told you before. But that was tough for us to understand because it didn't make sense.
Well, he said, this is what makes him angry, or whatever word he used. And he's like, well, this is on me and not them. But again, this is very much playing the victim of people left. When things got hard, people left. When I was going through something, y'all left. But it is on you, Carl. Like, that's on you. You are the one who chose to engage in an affair that was a betrayal to your entire family. And if we go based on some of the information that was presented in the docuseries, it very much seemed like Carl and Laura were alluding to Carl and Leona having a consensual, inappropriate relationship. Again, Leona says that this was not consensual, and she's made her allegations, but the way that they spoke about it, where the inappropriate relationship comes into play, it was like a consensual thing. They don't exactly label everything that happened, but it's like, oh, well, we had to set boundaries, and she was just always there, and I caught them in a compromising position, right? So we have Leona, and then we have, her name is Kanine, I think. That's gonna bother me. Let me look it up. Okay, her name is Reneen Kareem. And so, yeah, you've got friends who probably, even if they are friends with Laura, it's probably hard for them to stomach any of it and how to move forward with that. I don't think you can fault anybody for how they respond to that thing. And I'm sure it does hurt to be like, aside from me, like if you're Carl, like aside from me and my actions, you're friends with Laura, like you're friends with her, and now you're completely out. But it wouldn't surprise me if there had been rumors going around the church of the inappropriate relationship is what we'll call it with Leona. It might be very possible that Carl was completely hiding the affair with Renine, and like none of his friends knew about that. But if what was happening between Carl and Leona was more considered to be an open secret, if there were rumors, if people were talking about it, if it was like, hey, we're noticing things that are kind of odd, or we're kind of concerned about how much time you're spending with her. And so I would not be surprised if there were friends who were concerned about that. And then maybe they heard from Leona herself, maybe they heard from other people that Laura basically helped keep Leona quiet and kind of threatened her reputation not to say anything. Laura physically assaulted Leona, according to her own admission. And so, I don't know how these friends found out about things like that, but it would not surprise me if they were like, Laura, like, what is happening? Why are you covering this up? Why are you allowing this behavior to happen? Because you're aware of it on some level, and you're going after Leona instead of taking it up with your husband. Or if some people just in general were like, I don't want to be involved in this, and I don't know how to be there for Laura when I have such negative feelings about Carl. When you are here and you're staying and you're trying to work through it and like rebuild your family, I totally respect it, totally like get it. You guys do whatever works best for you and your family, but I don't respect the things that Carl has done, and I don't know how to be there for you while you are still choosing to be with someone who has done this.
Us, and I'm going, yeah, leave me, I get that, but why would you do that to my wife? And again, it becomes a mirror moment where you got to look in the mirror. I did this, I started this, but it wasn't fair. And we were able to say that. We were able to land on your side of things going, no, your offense is legit. That exposed a lot. Like some people just never, people we were friends with for decades didn't even text
Never even
you.
heard from him, yeah.
Not even a text. I'm like, I would text my worst enemy.
Right.
And in the middle of a crisis, there were people who, they just left you. And some people spiritualized it. Some people rationalized it. And you got to do what you got to do. It's like, cool. If and I don't think everybody's proud of that, but I think there is a side of it that someone said to me, my mental health had to come first. If I stayed in your life during that hard time, it wouldn't have been good for me. And I said, I get that. Mm-hmm. That's okay. You've got to do that. Right. That's probably a healthy thing to do. I get it. It's hard for me because it's like, but you're the priority there. So I think with relationships, we've just found they're as honest as you make them. Mm-hmm. They're as deep as you make them. Now we don't really play around. It's like, you're not going to catch me. I guess I'm more careful with my words. Yeah. Because we did have some heavy things said. You know, family, you're my brother. I love you. I've got for life.
You, yeah.
I
to
got
our
you.
Kids too.
Yeah, we used to have a joke with each other's kids. Like, if your daddy ever goes to heaven early, I'm going to take care of you. And that stuff actually sticks with kids. Yep. So our kids were sitting there going like, so those people were liars too, Dad? Like, well, how come they get away with lying? I'm going, no. They're not lying. And then a therapist told me to stop defending people who have left my life so my kids can have their process. Mm-hmm. And they have their own opinion about it. But again,
they've had their process, which has been really great to watch as well. And the fact that they can be honest about it, and we let them be honest about it, not in a degrading or anything way. They're just honest with their feelings. And a couple of your friends have reached out.
Well, I don't think those people were lying when they said those things. I think they said those things based on the relationship that they thought they had with you guys. And then when they find out that, you might not be who I thought you were, and they have to distance themselves, it's just that their relationship to you has changed. It's not necessarily that they said those things with the intent of it not being true or being like, yeah, I'm going to tell your kid I'll be there for him, but I really have no intention of it. It's just relationships changed because of your actions.
And talk to, especially Ava and to Charlie.
One friend did
that. And at one point, Ava was like, thanks for reaching out, but I'm
Don't wanna
not
talk to
ready.
you. Yeah.
I'm not ready to talk to you. And they respected that, which was great. And then she has since then talked.
Yeah.
But
And I have been explicitly clear with them that it's these
That's
are
okay, yeah.
my issues caused this relational
Yeah.
breach, not them.
yeah, but
They're
they
just
had
doing
to
the
process
best they
it
can,
themselves, yeah.
but you got to process it the way you can. So I think the only thing that I took from that's to me something, it's not a concern, it's just something to talk about. Like, we're all leaders. Me and my friends are all church leaders. And if that's how we act, it's not right or wrong. It's just, let's be honest about it. So when someone falls,
Just say it, yeah.
We're leaving them.
Right.
And that's okay. But people need to know that, because if that's how the leadership is, how does that flow down?
Flow down to
in
the rest
Christian
of
communities?
your,
And
100%.
unfortunately, I think it's pretty common. And I think that's what we build our stuff on. There is nothing you can do that's going to, break. Don't be ashamed of this. Like, we built our
Oh yeah, come as you are.
messages,
Yeah,
come as you
everything
are.
is, you're accepted here.
And it is hard. It's a human moment, but we do have to. We did unfollow a lot of people because I can't watch certain people
can't watch
preach about
some-
some
yeah.
subject. It's like, dude, don't preach about.
Don't talk
deep
about grace
friendship.
or, yeah.
Don't talk about you have a heart for restoring fallen ministers, because
You're
if
not
you
doing
did,
it.
you would have called me.
Yeah, it is. I did have to
So
unfollow
that's
a
a
few
tough
people.
one.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. That's just being human. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying there are moments I got to check myself. But I always land on the
Sure.
same
It's a human
freaking
emotion.
thing. If you want to have great friendships, don't be dishonest in them.
Right.
I wasn't honest with my friends. I was honest as I knew how to be. And I wasn't so much a liar to your face to my friends. I was allow you to think things are true, even though I know they're not, which is just as much
It's just as
a
a
lie
lie.
as me verbalizing something. And I had to come
But
to
don't you
grips with
think
that.
everyone does that
I do.
in relationships and friendships?
They do. Yep.
And in life in general?
They do.
So that's a hard one as well.
It is.
It's
It
hard
is.
to,
I
like-
didn't know, and I think there was some stuff that spilled out into other areas that, I love the theory we've always stood on. Don't judge somebody on their failure. Judge them on their reaction to the correction of their failure. So
Well,
I hope my reaction shows who I am.
I
who I'm
think
trying
that's
to
what I was
be.
going to say. Like, you took responsibility from the get-go, and you did the process all the way through, and I think you did it very well as you could.
Yeah.
And so for people to come at you in some of those ways, that was hard for me as a wife to watch as
I'm
well.
sure it was, but it's such a beautiful place to be, where you like, who am I to hold any bitterness towards these guys for not acting like however I think they should act.
Yeah.
Hello,
Right.
newsflash. So there are parts of me, I'm like, yeah, I do friendship different now. And that's great. I'm sad. Sometimes I look back on that chapter of my life and I love those guys. I'm sad,
Yeah.
but I'm good. Like,
Yeah.
where life goes on, life is long. Not everybody that's in your life is in your
Forever.
life for life.
Right.
Some are for seasons, and evidently sometimes that chooses us. We don't choose it, because I wouldn't have chosen to break a relationship with any of the guys that I love like that. So, but that's where we stand with friendships now. We love everybody. We're not holding any bitterness or any, animosity. I think we're just trying to heal, and we're moving forward. One thing we've definitely learned with friendships is when they break down, when there's dysfunction, focus.
It sounds like there's a little bit of bitterness, which is fine. I mean, it's like natural to be to look at something from how it made you feel and from your perspective, and to be like, what the heck? I thought we were super close. I would have done anything for you, and now you've just left my life. But yeah, to get on a podcast and kind of just be like, that was wild. They just completely left and dipped out, and that sucks. It's like, yeah, well, I understand why some people would just choose to distance themselves.
more on your role. Focus. Where are you in the story? Because it's so easy to point at.
Finger, yeah.
So, for instance, what that means for me, if I was mad at one of my friends that left, my criticism would be, "You're a hypocrite." That would be my criticism for them, because you don't carry the same logic. You don't. There's other people you're not consistent with, and you're saying one thing, and then if I look in the mirror, I don't think I'm the guy to hold somebody else accountable for something that may or may not be hypocritical. So
That's
rather
good.
than point the finger, I'm just in this habit of going, I'm not going to go over to that side of the track. I'm just going to work on here. I'm working on my own hypocrisy. I'm working on my own ability to be a
Sure.
friend. I don't choose to look at my situations like, did I have bad friends? No. It's probably more accurate to say, maybe I wasn't a great friend at times because I wasn't honest with my life. That's
Right.
fair.
Yeah.
And it helps you
Mhm.
stay free. So that's my encouragement to anybody with friendship, heartache. It's real. It's hard. It takes a while. Time doesn't heal anything.
Yeah, do you love that saying?
Intentional work heals. Time makes
Right.
it worse. So when people are like time heals, I have not found that to be true. I think time makes you a time bomb. That's what it does. So just time alone, no. Intentional work, intentional forgiveness, intentional
good.
acceptance. That's what changes somebody's life. And the ability to accept things was not in my vocabulary before all this went down. If I didn't like it, I'm not accepting it. Well, guess what? I don't control everything. And I can't control what somebody else is doing. So I've learned I accept that.
Yeah.
And I don't have, that doesn't mean I like it, approve of it. It doesn't mean that I endorse it. But like when someone left my life, it's like, okay, I accept it. It's hurtful and I'm sad and I'm sorry that I put you in a position to leave, and I accept it. There's something really peaceful about it. That's why it's like a bedrock of recovery, is praying prayers centered around accepting things, because it's a superpower if you get it right. I accept it.
I was going to say, that's so hard for me to do.
Yeah.
And it's got to be so hard for you. So that's how I know that you're doing the work, because that is not what you would do.
And the flip side of it is that I got to really protect myself around people that love us that haven't gotten over it. And it's not even their relationships. It's like, man,
Yeah.
I can't stand this guy, that guy, that guy. And I'm like, no, like that's not, first of all, don't reopen all this stuff in me. It
Yeah.
was my relationship. I have settled it. I have peace. Please don't bring it back up with your offense. You've now taken on my offense.
My offense, yeah.
And you live in it. And that's not even fair for them. But yeah, so we're at a good place with friendships and relationships, and we're just going to cultivate the kind of relationships moving forward. We just, yeah, they're going to be easier. They're going to be honest, and it is what it is. So yeah, that's my summation of how I feel about friendships. It's a good conversation to have.
So there's like 4 minutes left of this, and I've just come to the realization that we're really not going to get anything about Hillsong. We're not going to get any of like the inside scoop. This has really been, I don't know, some of the stuff that they talked about in episode 1 just kind of reiterated or said in a different way. It's spoken about in more detail in terms of what their treatments each looked like, and talking about friendship and forgiveness. And sure, that's great. But I thought that we were going to get like, I don't know, something on Hillsong. I thought there was going to be some sort of, I don't know, tie-in with like his life kind of spinning out of control, or why he started abusing his prescription, because of the high pressure, because of all of the responsibility that was on him, and the pace that he had to work at to keep up with expectations. Like, I just kind of thought we would get into that in a little bit more depth, but unfortunately, I don't believe that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We'll have more down the road.
Yeah, for sure. It's been said a few times, the comeback. When are you coming back? Or when are you come back, Carl? Like, I want to be there with you when you come back. Like, what do you feel about that? How do you feel about
I
that?
appreciate it. I totally understand it, because it's a word used and it's a thing. What we think is there's no comeback, because the person that I was is no longer here. Just not here. That version of me died.
Right.
And what has developed is a new person, a new life, a new lease on life, a new mentality, a new way to think. So I wouldn't say I'm coming back, because there's nothing to come back to. The chapter closed. Okay. To go back to that would mean I'm going backwards, literally. I don't want to come back to that life. I don't want to go back to that church circle. I don't want to go back to that way of thinking. I don't want to go back to any of it. I feel like for us, it's a new chapter. If anything, it's a rebirth. I mean, we started our second marriage. There are other things that we've decided to look at like that. We're in the second half of life. And so, no, if people are like, are you coming back? No, I'm not coming back. Because, as a preaching church, we're doing a podcast to talk about things that were painful for us in the hopes that other people won't have to go through the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's a rebirth into that. That's it. Relax. No comeback. There's nothing to come back to. It's a new start.
Preaching?
And that's probably the right approach. I mean, at this point, maybe in a few years it'll be a different perspective, but at this point, he would not obviously be able to go back to Hillsong, and I'm not sure what kind of church he would choose if he was going to try and like get a job at an existing church. I don't think he nor his wife are in a spot to do like a church plant. So for now, I think the podcast is right where they need to be. If they feel the need to talk publicly and share their opinion on things, podcast is a great forum for them. Yeah,
I miss parts of it, and yes, easy answer is yeah. I miss preaching because I like what we're able to do. I know also what I'm created to do. I know what I'm good at. I'm a good preacher. God gifted me to be able to communicate things in a way that a lot of people resonate with. So that's a part of it that I miss, but I'm really content in the season.
And do you like what you're doing now?
Yeah, I love it. It feels really free to not be leading something so heavy.
Right.
And I'm still enjoying it. And there's a price to pay both ways. So I love what we do. You've started multiple businesses. To tell people, this journey for you has been beautiful and selfless. Like you've done multiple jobs in Florida. You came home one day and I said, "What are you doing?" And you said, "I'm a Uber Eats driver." And I think I went outside and lit myself on fire. I just couldn't believe your resilience. You had 3 jobs, and I had to get a new job as well. And it was just a crazy chapter. But you're the bravest person I know to be able to do that. It was incredible.
Well, it was hard, but it was like trying to figure out what we were going to do because all we knew was church.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is why a lot of people just rush over it and keep doing it because they're like, I don't know what else. I can't do anything else with my life. This is all I know, which is sad because there's so much more to life as well.
And I'll say this. I think how I would sum it up is people talk about the word restoration. Here's what I wanted to be restored to: your husband and their dad.
Yeah.
So I'm good.
Right.
People always put the words to ministry on the back of restoration to ministry. And I believe it does the whole word a disservice. We've never been about that. We've never had a single conversation about that. It's simply been about let's try to restore our lives, and from there we'll move forward. Someone told me, he said, "Hey, you only got to convince 4 people that you're changing, and that's Laura and your children. After that, everything else is gravy." I'm in the gravy stage. I'm good. We are content now in the present, really excited about the future, and healed enough to talk about the past. So all in all, we got a whole lot to be grateful for. And
all right.
I'm grateful for you.
All right. Well, that was episode 2. Not exactly what I had hoped that they were going to give us in episode 2, but realistically, pretty much lines up with what I should have expected in terms of how much they would share with us. So feel free to let me know if you have any thoughts or any additional info that you want to share, any opinions on the things that they said. You can leave them in the comments section down below if you are watching this on YouTube, or in the Q&A for this episode if you are listening to the podcast on Spotify. And while you are doing that, if you would consider liking this video or subscribing to my channel, that would be incredible. Or if you could leave the podcast a rating and a review, that would be amazing as well. If you've done any of those things, thank you so much. I am so appreciative of you, and I love being able to just sit here, hang out with you, and talk about whatever. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Please be kind to people, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.